Welcome, everyone, to the ThoughtFuel Podcast. Today, we have an amazing episode with our flexibility and mobility expert, Jasmin Monserrate. And she will be discussing a lot of things today, including stretching, mobility, the importance of movement, and the modern day lifestyle. So, without any further ado, Jasmin, welcome to the ThoughtFuel Podcast.
What a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite. Really excited to chat with you. I feel like we always have really good conversation around health, mindset, movement. So it just felt like the right thing to do.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been in fitness for coming up on 5 years now. I started as a personal trainer, and it wasn't until 2.5 years into my journey as a fitness coach that I found flexibility. During COVID, like most people, I had a lot of time on my hands. I was scrolling on Instagram and I came across this woman who was just making the most incredible shapes with her body. I had actually never seen anything like it. I saw that she was teaching these online classes, and I joined a class. The day of the class comes, she cancels the class, but then she sends me this message privately saying, "Hey, do you want to do a one-on-one session?" And I was blown away because I was so impressed by her. And come to find out, she's a contortionist, and contortion is this practice of displaying extreme flexibility in a performance style. And I remember from maybe our second session, we were doing a very deep hip opening pose, and I just remember bursting out in tears, and I didn't know where that emotion was coming from. I was so I just felt so much. And then after that session, I just knew that this was something that was definitely for me. And not only was I experiencing benefits physically, like deepening my poses and getting more flexible, but I felt like there was this emotional healing that was happening from the inside out. And it was just really, really powerful. And I fell in love with it from that moment. And now I've been practicing for coming up on 3 years. This journey of movement has brought me into other facets of trying to learn how to handstand, and it's just been an amazing journey, but it really did all stem from opening up my body.
Yeah. And I guess for anybody out there that has done any yoga or any stretch related exercise, they know that something like a hip opening exercise or any type of exercise has a level of pain associated with it, right? Because obviously muscles cramp up, they harden over time, and the practice of actual stretching is loosening up those muscle fibers. So there's a lot of pain associated with it. Can you tell us a little bit about how that relationship with pain eases over time, and or is it always painful and you just get used to it?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to weightlifting. I always like to make that connection because I feel like people stretch and you always see them doing this they're sitting on their butt, one foot in, they're doing that side stretch, and they're not really putting effort into it. Um Lifting certain weights gets easier over time. Bicep curling 5 pounds will get easier over time. You can always advance it and make it more difficult by adding more resistance. It's the same thing with stretching and with mobility. The same poses that you do over time will get easier and will feel less painful, unless you were to take a big gap. Again, just like weightlifting, you take time off, you come back to this practice. It's I'm starting from scratch again. But for the sensation of pain, I think you're able to train your body to not register it as pain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And no, full disclosure here, I similarly to Jasmine, seeing somebody online and saying, "Oh my God, how does this person how can this person do this with their body? I saw Jasmin online and said, oh my God, how does this person do this with their body? And I sought her out and I reached out to her, and I've been training with her now for about 2.5 months or so. And the reason why I brought up pain and the relationship with pain, stretching is a very painful process, especially if you are not the type of person that stretches on a regular basis and isn't the type of person that does the proper preparation prior to working out and after they work out with a mixture of dynamic and static stretching. So, Jasmin, for the audience that may not know, what's the difference between dynamic and static stretching?
Yeah, so they have different functions for and purposes. Dynamic stretching is this preparatory style of stretching. It's stretching in motion. It's more lax, and it's just to prep and prime the body for whatever movement or sport you're about to start. Right. So maybe a dynamic stretch for someone who's going to lift weights is going to be very different from a dynamic stretch from someone who's going to play soccer. Right. They have different types of dynamic stretch that are different and for every sport and every, movement facet. Static stretching is stretching that you would want to do post lift. And it's more of a recovery as you've just like really worked and created all these micro tears in your muscle fibers. So you want to, instead of allowing it to like kind of stay stagnant post workout, post like exercise, post whatever movement you do, you want to do this static stretching where you're holding stretches from anywhere from like, 30 to 60 seconds in a deep pose, focusing on your breath. And that'll allow you to kind of maintain your mobility.
Exactly, and it'll avert you from being prone to injury as much as you would if you went into the gym and started lifting heavy weights with very cold, hard muscles that haven't really been softened out by the dynamic stretch, right?
Yeah. What's also interesting is that like when you do these dynamic and static stretches, they're both helpful, right? Um, like you mentioned, you do prevent against injury. I see a lot of my friends who are competing in these competitions at very high levels, and when you tear an Achilles or when you tear an ACL, those injuries are really difficult to come back from because um, like they have their own blood supply, and tendons and ligaments, they just don't get as much of their own blood supply, so healing these that connective tissue is like much more difficult. So like although stretching is like amazing for like just your muscles, it's also like one of the main reasons you want to do it is also for like your joints, your ligaments, your tendons, which don't have the same recovery element that muscles and even bones can have. Like if a bone breaks, it's going to heal better, right? Stronger. If a tendon or a ligament tears, it'll heal, but it's not. I don't know if it will actually ever really be the
Heal
same.
100%.
Yeah,
Exactly. And as you age, that process of healing just takes a downward curve. And one thing that Jasmin and I talk a lot about when we're stretching, when I'm in pain, just trying to ignore the pain itself, is longevity and the works of David Sinclair and Peter Attia, and how important stretching and movement is, and why, if you're in your 30s and 40s, your focus should be not to, just aesthetic purposes of working out and the dopamine hit of feeling good and working out. It's more so training to be the fittest 60-year-old and 70-year-old and 80-year-old that you can be, right? Because if you can't run now, like a 5 mile run, you're not going to be able to run it when you're 60 and 70. And that also may mean that you're going to have difficulties walking. There's certain things that you need to be training for from a long-term perspective. And the same thing and the same science that applies to your career, to your finances, thinking about the future, the same applies with working out and trying to envision what type of life you want to have in 20 and 30 years. Because if you're having difficulties doing anything now from a movement standpoint, whether that's picking something up or running after a toddler, you will have difficulties chasing after that toddler's children when you're in your 70s and 80s. And that's something that, for me, and one of the reasons why I sought out Jasmin and why I have such a fascination with working out and movement and being healthy and longevity in general, and the study of how I can improve my the quality of my life through exercise, has been having a child in my late 30s, and the thought that, oh my God, when she's going to be 20, I'm going to be 60. When if she has children around the same time that that I had children, then I'm going to be 80 years old. I'm going to be well into my late 70s, and I'll be a first-time grandfather. So those things come into play, and I really need to be thinking about, okay, well, what kind of quality of life do I want to have then? Do I want those grandchildren to always remember me as an old, immobile person? So I guess, Jasmine, from your work, what is one of the main factors for people to be successful in changing the quality of their lives and sticking to such an important habit as exercise and stretching and just adding more movement to a sedentary modern life?
Yeah. So I think that most of the time people can acknowledge that there's a change that needs to be made. They're like, okay, I am overweight, or I can't do basic things or that I know I should be able to do. So I know I need to make a change. I think the issue with most novice is being able to stick to and follow a routine. Um, Especially when it's painful. You've been doing this for 2.5 months and you're still like, this hurts, you know? So it's like difficult for someone and like, you're already deep and you care about fitness. You have this strong why as to what the reason you show up and endure this pain. I would say the biggest part is being able to stick to that routine, which is why I think coaching is really great. Would would you stretch on your own consistently with the level of pain if you didn't have someone to like support you? And for me, when I was starting my flexibility journey, I like also sought out a coach, which was very helpful. There are tons of resources that are like free, and there's not a scarcity of resources, right? Like if you want to like live a fit and healthy life, like there are free resources, there are books, there are YouTube videos, there are so many resources, but I feel like having accountability and creating a consistent routine is like the most important. And if you find that you're like struggling to do that, looking for a coach that you connect with, that is an expert in what they do, could be really, really helpful. Um,
Yeah.
I was also going to say, you were talking about longevity. There's this quote that I love, and I always share it with all of my clients. And it's that we don't we don't get old because we stop moving. Wait, maybe I'm messing this up. Okay, we don't stop moving. We don't stop moving because we get old. We get old because we stop moving.
Exactly, exactly.
And it's
I
just
love
like,
that.
I see like such a difference in like, you know, uh just like older individuals. And when I say older, I'm talking about 50s or 55. Like my mom, for example, who's super sedentary. And then I have this other client who's, 52, and we go on runs for like 5 miles. And we're pushing each other,
He's
and he's
smoking you
27. You know what
sometimes.
I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I I only hope but to be that person. And I
Yeah.
think that if more people thought like you think how like I try to view fitness, we're playing a long game and it's an uphill battle. We're our body is going to degrade and all we can do is like prepare.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I want to touch both parts of your answer. One being the reason why people should be seeking out a coach is, for me, the biggest thing is to understand your why. And once you're clear on your why, you're going to get to the gym. You're going to put in the hours. The problem is the coach is really not just going to help you be accountable, because you may have that, your why may be so strong and such a big part of who you are, but you could go in and you're going to get to the gym. It could be snowing outside or raining, or you had a difficult week and you just are not in the mood to go work out, but you'll make it to the parking lot of your gym and you'll get there and you'll put in that hour, even if it's not an hour of optimum exercise. But having a coach, the coach will push you to a place that you're not comfortable with being, and that's where you really grow. Really pushing yourself and taking you to a place where you're very, very uncomfortable. And that's how you're going to grow, especially when it comes to flexibility and stretching. Um, I I have, although I didn't previously, I think since I started training with you, I've started incorporating both dynamic and static stretching in my workouts. Um, and I see the improvement it's made. It's made me less prone to injuries. It's made my workouts much more pleasurable. Um, but when I have my sessions with you, I'm in that state of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm pushing myself this much. And I'm okay. I'm not breaking, right? I can push my body to that point and not break. So there's much more than this. And if anybody's read the works of David Goggins or seen what type of lunatic he is, you know that whatever you think you're capable of, there's so much more. It's like it's just the surface of the ocean. And there's just so much more down there if you dig deeper. And sometimes not sometimes, actually, correction, most of the times you'll never push yourself to the deepest parts of your inner ocean unless you're forced there, because your brain doesn't want you to. It'll push you back. So definitely, if you're wondering whether there's any benefit to getting a coach, and that doesn't need to be, obviously for cost purposes, it doesn't need to be one-to-one. It could be in a group setting. It could be just finding somebody that's just way better at whatever you're trying to achieve and just aligning with them and getting yourself to be pushed to that place where you're very uncomfortable. And then the second part is, the longevity and the difference between a in shape 55-year-old and an out of shape 55-year-old. And if you are listening to this and you're 27 and you're 28 and you're thinking, oh, this isn't relative to me, and you don't work out, then you're probably going to be an out of shape 55-year-old. There's no question about it. If you want to be a in shape 55-year-old, you need to be an in shape 40-year-old. You need to be an in shape 35-year-old. The commitment starts today. And if you don't do it, then you're going to come to a point where you will regret it, right? Because our lifestyle, the modern lifestyle, has so many pitfalls for us to not have a good quality of life in our 60s, 70s, and 80s. And if you look into the statistics, they're really, really bad. Jasmine, from your experience, do you get a lot of younger people into mobility and flexibility, or are you seeing a lot more people coming into it later in life?
Yeah, that's a good question. So from my view, I feel like personal training, like one-on-one coaching, is definitely like a premium fitness option, and I find that the people who could afford that are, probably aged like late 20s, um, early to mid 30s. But I get it's mostly like 30-year-olds who are pretty much like early to mid 30s to late 30s, some 40s, some 50s, but it's like 30 plus. And I find that that's probably because like these people are more settled in their career and they're like, okay, wellness is important. I'm going to start to like seek out help to like find that. Um, I do make a point to create a lot of content for on like TikTok and Instagram to try to like encourage people to become more mobile. I think what's interesting is that sometimes people see other people on social media, and like that gap between like where they are and what they see is so big that it might be like intimidating. Um, but I mean, it's important like regardless of your age, and I do find that the earlier you start, like you said, like if you start probably around like 27, 28, by the time you're 50, it's really going to feel like effortless. It's going to be a part of your routine. um,
Absolutely. And a big correlation with that is if anybody has a good analogy of that is if anybody has run a half marathon or a 5K and they're they're out of shape and they see somebody that's like 90-year-old just smoking by them like with ease, and you're just looking at it, that person didn't start at 87. That person started way younger, put in the time, and that's why they're where they're at and they can move at that pace. And that's why it's just so important. And, we're in a crazy time right now because I remember, and I'm much older than you, and I remember the time where, I remember the time where, 60 years old was old. 60-year-old
mm,
was really old, and now it's not for me. Not, and maybe you change perspective. People are having children a lot later in life. They're getting married later in life if they're getting married at all. um, People are living much longer than they used to. You're seeing people live well into their 90s and 100s, right? So the importance of living well and being able to be in shape has never been more important, right? Especially if you're retiring 65, 67, you really, in any career planning that you do, you really want to think, all right, okay, well, what does retirement look like for me? What kind of quality of life do I want to have? Am I going to retire and just sit on the couch and watch daytime TV? Or am I really going to want to see the world and be able to have quality relationships because I'll be able to have a great quality of life of that's filled with movement and activity. And our modern life prohibits us significantly from doing that because if we look at the stats from a U.S. perspective, uh, the CDC estimates that Americans sit anywhere between 6.5 hours to 8 hours a day, and and everybody within the research realm is talking about how sitting is the new smoking, the impact of all that sitting on our spine. And then you couple that with the use of cell phones and how that's changed our posture and the impact it's having on our muscular skeleton system. And there's all this research that indicates that sitting and the tech neck, which is um, the propensity to look down and hold your phone, that has such an impact to heart disease, diabetes. It's been linked to cancer, weight gain, dementia, high blood sugar. And then, and again, Americans also log in like some of the worst habits for sleeping. So they sleep what, like 6 hours? So you're talking about 6 hours plus another 6 to 8 hours. Americans spend almost two-thirds of their lives sitting or laying down. And what are we doing? What are we doing? How much are we wasting our lives here? And if you have that ability to move, it just adds so much pleasure to everyday interactions, chasing your kids, meeting with friends, the things that you do when you meet with friends, all of that. So I highly encourage people, if you're listening to this right now, get out and move. Get out and move.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and movement is like, it definitely will make you less stressed. It'll definitely make you happier, right? As you exercise, the endorphins start flowing. And I find that for a lot of my clients, their big thing when they say like, aside from, longevity and wanting to like feel better, the the thing it does for their stress, because a lot of these people do work 9 to 5s, so they are sitting most of the time, and they have high stress jobs because I'm based in New York, you're based in New York. It's like
it's
the
the New
work
York City
culture
lifestyle.
here.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like if you're not in the office by, like, I work with a lot of finance people. If you're not in the office by 7 a.m., and if you're not leaving after your boss leaves, let's say your boss stays late, 7:30,
Yeah.
if you're leaving before your boss, it's like they're clocking that. And if you're talking about trying to climb a corporate ladder, and everything you do is like being watched for grading purposes, for your ability to um, move up socioeconomically, it's like it's so stressful. Even just saying it like that, it
Yeah.
seems very, very stressful. So
Well, it's ironic because you're killing yourself to make a living. And if you don't understand of the impact of what you're doing to your body, and because I do want to make sure that we link this back to stretching and movement and flexibility, but one of the biggest markers of frailty is the lack of movement. And preparing just for this interview, I went down this rabbit hole yesterday on how the biggest injury related, basically deaths that happen over the age of 65 are related to falls. So people fall down because they have such a lack of balance, and and muscle coordination after years and years of sitting. And the stats are like kind of alarming. There are about 40,000 Americans over the age of 65 die each year from just falling down. Another 4 million are treated in the ER for falls, for falling down. So it makes you wonder, right? Like right now, if you're in your 20s and 30s, falling down is not a concern at all. But if you're not moving, if movement isn't part of your daily life, whether that's logging in, you know, 10,000 steps a day, or running on a treadmill, or getting on a bike, or lifting weights, you should be concerned about falling at some point in your life. It's just the reality. And especially after 40, all of the components of what makes you a healthy person, if you're inactive and you do not take care of yourself, everything takes a steep decline. And that's correlated with your your muscle mass, your hormone levels, and you really need to be making that investment on a daily basis. So, Jasmin, I guess, from your standpoint, before we close this session out, what advice would you give someone that's never really taken exercise very serious?
Okay. Well, aside from you have one body and you have to nurture it because you only get one. You can't buy a healthy body. You can pay for training, you can pay for exercise classes, you can pay for all of Ozempic, like you could pay for all of that, but that's not what's going to be the thing that like, makes you healthy. Um, so taking it seriously, because you should take it seriously. You only get one. Two, if you're struggling to keep a routine, um, finding some sort of support, whether that be like online coaching, whether that be online classes, whether that be in-person classes. There are so many options for all different socioeconomic backgrounds. There are free options. I don't know if those are always the best, just because I feel like if you're starting something new, right, we spoke about that a little bit early, but there are plenty of options for you out there. You just need to find one and get started. And tomorrow is not when you start. It's today.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Tomorrow is the death of everything.
Exactly.
um, so like look for it today for sure.
Yeah. And any book recommendations for our listeners?
Yeah, we were talking about this. So like I feel like you and I talk about, personal development. And from a personal development standpoint, something that has like drastically helped me is Atomic Habits by James Clear. That, that is the essence of life, right? Build your life is an accumulation of your habits. And he says it so eloquently, and it's so true, because like when you wake up and you make your bed and you do these small things that like really just like give you this nice big picture, it does like change the game of how you view yourself. Um, and then we were talking about this. There's this other book, Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil. I'm a huge Napoleon Hill fan just because I am an entrepreneur, and learning about business is really important. It's a little bit niche because obviously it's like, outwitting the devil. That means that he's like Christian, there's like heaven and hell, but it talks
Yeah.
about how this like hypnotic rhythm and these patterns that keep you in hell on earth. And I don't want
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
but it's really, really interesting. Regardless of whether you believe in that or
Yeah.
not, just this idea of like, hell on earth being
Well,
hypnotic rhythms of things that you get yourself into. It's like if you're like a chronic smoker and you just smoke now because like it's become a habit. You don't even realize that you're like going for it for that. Does that make sense?
yeah, that does make sense. That does make sense. So, Jasmin, if our audience wants to seek you out, where can they find you?
So Instagram, TikTok, a big TikTok fan, huge. Jasmin underscore Monserrate. I don't know if you could like link it in some
Yeah.
show notes or something like that, but like that's the best place to find me.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to our session this week.
Oh yeah.
I said that with a dose of irony. I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to seeing you, but I don't know about
The stretching.
the exercise that we're going to be doing. So, looking forward to it. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing the benefit of ingraining flexibility and mobility in your daily life. Thank
Heck
you,
yeah.
everybody, for listening and joining us in this episode of the ThoughtFuel Podcast. Have a great day.
Good day.